For the ignition system on this build, we're going with some wasted spark coils. These are off a 99 2000 Subaru WRX. I'm using them because I know what they look like and where to get them from. Pretty basic thing. They've got an internal igniter, so we don't need a separate igniter. And they've just got normal post, so really easy to get leads for. We can just get any HEI lead. And just sort of set them up by size, which really reduces the cost rather than having to make leads, which you normally have to do with LS stuff. So what we're going to do is use 2 of them, of course, and they're going to be mounted in a firewall like this, or like that, as it were. Nut inserted in, second one underneath, and then we'll just run the leads to the appropriate coil and wire them up appropriately. So that's good to go. We're just about to start drilling holes in the firewall with that. We've also been fiddling around with a bit of plumbing. We've got the transfer pipes for it's like steam port that an LS has on the front. Well, it's got them on front and rear each head, but normally the rear ones are just blocked off, so we've blocked them off. The engine didn't come with the little bits of steel things that they have standard, so I tapped them out to 1/8 NPT so we could just screw stuff into it. So we've done that and set it up just with some black fittings and pipe, just to try and keep it a bit stealth. You could probably just block them off, but we figured they've obviously put them there for a good reason, so we better run them. The other thing we've been fiddling around with is the alternator. Because this car has no power steering, the drive belt path needs to be modified, because if you just try and put the belt on in the obvious way, it'll actually have no drive from the crank, and the water pump will probably slip, so you end up with belt smoke and rubber everywhere. So what we do there is add a couple of pulleys to make the belt go around the crankshaft and around the water pump pulley more. So we've just actually used existing parts from the front of the engine and just modified them a little bit to make them work. Other than that, we have figured out that we're not going to get good headers through because there's just no room. The steering gear, like the drag link and everything, is just right in the middle of everything. So we're scratching our heads going, how have people done this before? Googling reveals that most people put steering racks in them. That's probably not going to be a thing for us at this stage of the build, because Cam doesn't want to go there yet. So a bit more Googling and a bit of thought, and we've discovered that fender well headers is a thing with these, where they cut a hole in the fender well in here, and the exhaust actually goes out inside the wheel arch behind the wheel and then returns back onto the car. Looks pretty cool. Stops you from bashing your exhaust into everything, stops you from burning your spark plug leads. So seems like a good thing, and I think we're going to go that way. We do have to remake all these brake lines and everything though, but they're probably one of the worst jobs I've ever seen, so it's probably a good thing that we're going to do that anyway. Obviously we need a bit of heat management, but that's the same with any build. So I've just ordered some more tubing because it's going to probably a bit more thirsty on the tubing, the way they're going to be routed. And as soon as that gets here, we'll probably start on the headers after we strip all the old brake lines and everything out and chuck them in the bin. So new brake lines now, needed to be done anyway. Other than that, we just keep plugging away and connecting things, still wiring. We've got the body wiring all done, we're just leaving it untaped at the moment just in case. We'll start on the engine wiring once the coils and everything are mounted. So heaps of work to do.
Before starting on the exhaust, Al is fitting up the fuel filter, which is mounted at the rear of the car. This item is from a BMW E46, which has a fuel pressure regulator built in. As mentioned in the previous episode, the fuel pressure setting is close enough to suit our application and also uses an 8mm barber fitting, so it's a great filter to use in an aftermarket situation. The fuel tank is then dropped back down to route all of the feed, return and ventilation hoses. Using some 10mm alloy tube, Dunning-Kruger AS is making up some spaces so the coil packs can be mounted on the firewall. A cardboard template helps, so the mounting holes can be drilled in the correct location. Nutserts are then used and the coil packs can then be bolted up ready for wiring.
This week on Frustration Factory, we try to make these incredibly slimline factory cast headers fit on this LS1 Nova. And guess what? They don't fit. This is a VF Commodore header. You can't get much more slimline than that, and it won't fit both between the towers, strut support towers, or between the steering box on the other side. So we're just trying to make it work without having to make headers and stuff and cut holes in the inner guards. There's just no way. There's plenty of other things wrong with this car too. Like, some people just should not work on cars. It's just got this sort of twisted knot of brake lines that just go everywhere, and then they're like too long, so that they've kind of like spiral wrapped the pipes around each other, but they're not held down to anything. Then they've decided that they can't bend it around a corner, so there's just joiners and stuff in the middle of nowhere. It's all just rubbish. So what we're going to have to do is make the headers go out the guards, because there's not much point having a big cam like this without proper exhaust system. It just won't work. Wouldn't work too well with these, but we're just sort of trying to stopgap it a bit until we could sort out either a front mounted steering rack or something later on where it would give some room for the headers. But that's not going to happen now. Some other problems with this car is that it's got this tubular sort of front end in it, which is great in theory, but like, it's got no steering stops anymore. So the wheel just plows into the inner guards and also runs over the top of the brake lines and stuff. It's just some strange things going on here. It's like not much attention to detail when it comes to some of these products. But anyway, our best bet is just go out through the guard and do a Fender exit or something. What do they call it? Is it Fender exit?
Zoomies, pipes up.
Oh, we could go out the bonnet, I suppose. That'd work. So yeah, that's what we're going to have to go back to that, and just trying to get around problems with, but it doesn't want to be got around. So we're going to go back to the Fender exit, Fender well exit, something like that. Seems to be a thing with Novas. I did a bit of Googling and found that you can actually buy small block Chev early generation headers from Hooker or something like that actually go out there. So seems like it might be just the way you got to do it if you got all this steering rubbish everywhere that just gets in the way of anything good, so we'll do that. So we're going to take the exhaust out through around about there, just sort of underneath where that superfluous hole is, and then it's going to run down through here in the inner guard. Originally we were going to do a long tube 4-into-1 sort of setup, but I've since spoken to some guys that have got Novas with this style headers on them, and they did report that there's a lot of heat transferred through the floor and it's not very pleasant. So I think I'm going to change the design to just a sort of a shorty 4-into-1, so there's only a single pipe running down in through the inner guard here where the heat's going to go through. This is meant to be just a cruising vehicle anyway, even though we've gone silly with the engine setup, but we don't want Cam's missus to hate it, because otherwise he might kill us. So just going to revise the design a bit. Basically we'll have a flange about there, then we'll just have a single pipe running through, so that'll keep the heat under control a bit more than having 4 44mm pipes running down the inner guard. So first thing we've got to do is bash 2 big ass holes through the fender well there and start making pipes. Regardless of how you're going to make your headers, the process is pretty much the same. Whether you're doing a simple 4-into-1 like this or a really complex long tube, you're basically using the same techniques. It just gets more complicated the longer the tube, header tube is, etc. You'll need pretty much the same materials, give or take, difference in collectors, but you'll obviously need header flanges specific to your engine. This is obviously an LS one. You'll notice that there's offset bolt holes in the middle. Don't get it upside down, otherwise you won't be able to bolt the header on after you've spent hours making them. I normally do put a bolt in the middle as well as the 2 outside edges, just to make sure that I have got it right. And I also write left-hand side up and which face is which. Like that's the head, this is the pipes, just so you don't get confused. I've been there before. It's not fun when you spend a day making a set of headers and realise that you've got the flange upside down and have to cut it all off again. So don't do it. You'll also need tons of these, whatever size you're using. These come in probably 2mm increments, which is something in inches that I'm not going to bother with. So 42, 44, 46, 48, 50s, depending on how wild your engine is, how big the capacity is. More so it's like matching it to the exhaust ports, that sort of thing. We're using 44mm, 1 3/4. You'll need collectors. That's a simple 4-into-1 open thing. You just bunch 4 pipes together and weld the insides of them together and then whack that over the top and weld around it. Very simple, quite easy to use. The other type is a slip jointed header. Also has its advantages. You just got to be more accurate with the way the pipes lead into it. The slip jointed ones are generally better for performance if you're really chasing that last bit. You can get them with an internal spike. It's for scavenging effect and that sort of thing. We're not really concerned about this on this particular engine. You can also use these 2-into-1s if you're doing a tri-Y type header. So 2 pipes into one pipe, other 2 pipes into one pipe, then 2 pipes out. That's a different way of tuning the engine to pick up mid-range torque, that sort of thing. You've got to match your headers, your cylinders when you do that. You need flanges as well to end it. Please don't weld the whole exhaust system to the headers, otherwise everyone that touches the car after you will hate you, and with good reason. There's no reason not to flange your exhaust system. It just makes it easier to work on the car afterwards. Assuming that you'll never have to touch the car in the future is ridiculous. Modified cars break. All cars break, but modified ones do more often. So flanges, they're cheap. Put them everywhere that's convenient so you can take sections of the exhaust off practically. All right, let's bolt her on and put it on the right way up.
Hey Al, do you think Cam's going to mind that there's a hole in the guard?
What hole?
Did you get onto him on the phone?
What hole?
You're just going to roll with that, are you?
Yep. So you can see where the collector's going to be. It's going to be on an angle like that to avoid the wheel. So basically we just got to join each port to there without getting in the way of each other, without getting in the way of the steering box, without getting in the way of the brake system, and without it being gumby and restricting the engine. So all simple stuff.
Don't forget about those plug wires either.
And the plug wires and the valve covers.
Plug wires or leads?
Depends on whether you're from America or Australia. Let's just say they're the same thing, so don't get butthurt when people call things a different name when they're from a different country than you.
That's just like ketchup and
you
tomato
can always
sauce.
Google it, hey. It's amazing, that thing. Use your brains.
Sandwich or burger?
Now you're getting into a whole new territory, bro.
Piecing together a set of exhaust manifolds can be a very tedious job, especially when there is limited room. Each pipe is cut to different sizes and angles, marked in place and tacked together. It's then fitted again to double check everything is in order before being TIG welded on the bench. The pipe is tacked back into place on the header flange, and the same process is followed for the other 3 runners. Once the runners are tacked to the header flange, the manifold is removed and bolted down onto some box steel. This will help to reduce the flange from warping after it's been welded.
So you're probably thinking, what the hell's going on here? This is rough as guts. And well, you're probably a bit right. Like, this is really the most basic form of merge collector you can do. It's really simple, it's rough, and it works. It's application specific, and the application is, it doesn't need to be flash, so it's not. Basically, we just weld all those internals together, make little bridges across here, then this goes over. We weld, tap in the edges and they reach the bridges, then you weld them together and that seals it all up. Then you flange it. Is this as good as like a slip joint collector? Hell no. It's just the application. It doesn't need a slip joint connector. It's not going to make it go any better, or that's not what they're paying for. So this is a bit like wiring. If you want a good job, you're going to have to pay for it. This is very time-consuming work. To do a set of long 4-into-1 headers, you're going to pay like a couple of $1,000s easy for it, depending on how hard it is to fit it in the car. So if it's a small block up in Impala or something that's got like thousands of feet of room in there, obviously it's going to be easier. If it's a Nova with any engine in it, it's going to suck because there's no room in the engine bay. So keep that in mind. You get what you pay for. The basic idea is the same. The difference with if we had to put a slip jointed collector on here is that we wouldn't have joined any of these pipes together. They would have just had a length of straight. They would have had to have been all collected in a bundle properly, so the slip joint can go over. You can either leave the slip joint just slipped on there and put some like tabs on it to hold it on there, or you can weld it. You can weld 3 of the pipes well, but the 4th pipe is usually going to have a small section that isn't welded because you just can't access it. That doesn't matter in an NA application because there's no exhaust pressure, and the slip jointing is a very good seal in itself. So that's why they don't actually weld them on in a lot of cases, because it doesn't need to be welded on. Or they've actually split the runners on some engines. Some engines you can take each runner out by itself, and that makes it like easy to put the actual runners in there in the first place. So you sort of assemble it one pipe at a time and then whack the collector over the top of it, bolt the collector on, bolt it all up, and you're done. Makes it easy to service if you need to get them out. So different ways of doing things, as always. It's not always blanket. This is the cheapest way, other than buying some headers that are already made, although I've never bought headers that actually fitted on any car. So there's a challenge for you, header companies. Make headers that actually fit. It shouldn't be that hard.
To save the manifold having to be wrestled to get in and out of the engine bay, the merge collector is going to be marked first in the car and then welded up on the bench. Each corner is tacked and then given some love with the acorn cracker to close up any gaps between the runners and the collector. Finally, the flange is welded on and all that's left is a coat of paint.
Just in the nick of time by the looks of things, Al.
What?
This gas bottle's almost empty on the MIG.
Good. Well, we've only got a whole exhaust system to do yet, so might have to restock.
What do you think about this side, Al?
Well, despite the fact that it doesn't have a brake booster and master cylinder and that sort of thing here, it's actually harder because the engine is offset to this side quite substantially, because they would have done that to avoid the steering box back in the day. So there's not a lot of space, especially around this strut tower. So might be a bit tighter than the other one. Wish we could just like click our fingers and make it done.
Check again, bro.
What? We do that every time?
Should have done with the other side, eh? It would be easier.
Hell yeah. Good job.